From ashes, stories rise. Welcome to Whispers of Chains, where burn still speaks. Before the fire there was a story.
Watch closely. This won't take long. Her seduction shattered their power. Chains couldn't break her spirit. Her eyes haunted them all. A story of desire, danger, and defiance.
The late autumn of 1854 arrived in Virginia like a slow, deliberate punishment. Rain fell in relentless grey sheets, softening the crimson clay of the Montclair estate into a treacherous, sucking mire. The ground seemed almost alive, ready to swallow anything that dared to cross it. On this day, a grand funeral brought the elite of the South to the Montclair estate. Judge Edmund Montclair, a man whose legal mind had commanded reverence and whose tobacco empire had fed the envy of Richmond's banks, was being lowered into the cold Virginia earth. The ceremony was a display of wealth and ritual, a performance of power and grief polished to perfection. Men in towering silk hats and women swathed in layers of black lace gathered around the family vault, their faces masks of solemnity. They murmured praise for the judge, his unwavering honor, his devotion to the law, the unshakable integrity of his name. But at exactly 50 yards from the polished circle of mourners stood Isabella Montclair, her spine rigid, a silent blade of defiance. She was a living contradiction, her skin the color of cream and honey, untouched by the harsh sun of the fields, her hair dark and thick, pinned back with severity, her eyes icy gray, piercing, unyielding, mirroring those of the man now in the grave. To the world, Isabella was a shadow, property listed in the estate ledger. To Judge Montclair, she had been a living experiment, a vessel into which he poured intellect and control. For 19 years, Isabella had walked the halls of the Montclair estate like a ghost, educated, elegant, forbidden to labor, yet legally nothing more than a slave. In the vast leather-scented library, he had taught her French, Greek, law, and music, not out of love but as a demonstration of dominance. Each lesson was a reminder that her brilliance existed at his whim. She had memorized statutes, played intricate piano pieces, recited poetry from memory, but all of it was a gilded cage, a testament to his cruel intellect. Her mother had died when Isabella was just a child, leaving behind whispers of resilience. "They can chain your hands, Bella," her mother had said, "but they can never chain the way you see the world." Yet now, as the first shovel of Virginia soil struck her father's coffin, Isabella's attention shifted to Julian Montclair, her legitimate half-brother. He stood at the head of the vault, his eyes wandering away from his father's body, searching for the future he wanted to claim. Julian saw Isabella not as a sister, not as a human being, but as a liability, an inconvenient reminder of his father's secret. He hated her eyes, which reflected the sins he wished to forget, and her skin, which defied the racial hierarchy that justified his power. Most importantly, he coveted what he thought was the key to the estate's survival: Isabella herself. That night, the Montclair estate became a tomb of silence. The air hung heavy with the scent of lilies, old tobacco, and betrayal. Isabella was summoned to the library, now the prison where knowledge and oppression intertwined. Julian sat in the high-backed chair that once belonged to their father, the gold signet ring of the Montclair family gleaming against the lamplight. "The estate is ruined," he said, his voice cold, detached. "All debts, all holdings, gone. And you, Isabella," his gaze hardened. "The freedom papers your father promised, they don't exist. You are to be sold. At dawn you will leave this house forever." The words were a blade, but Isabella did not falter. Her heart hammered, but her voice remained steady. "You can sell me," she said, "but you will never erase the Montclair blood in me. You will see me in every mirror, every shadow, every hall you walk." Julian recoiled, unable to confront the truth of her presence, and called for the overseer. The heavy iron shackles bit into her wrists as she was chained in the cellar, the cold metal a brutal reminder that in the eyes of the law, she was nothing more than property. Alone in the darkness, Isabella pressed her back against the stone wall. Every sound was amplified, the drip of water, the scuttle of rats, the relentless echo of her heartbeat. Yet in this abyss, her mind became a weapon. The law that had bound her now became the forge in which her resolve was tempered. She thought of her mother, the gentle locket she had worn beneath her coarse cotton dress, and the lessons of strength whispered in the quiet of the cabin they had once called home. The chains could bind her body but not her mind, and somewhere deep in her chest a fire began to burn, a fire that would consume those who dared to cage her. At 4 a.m, the wagon arrived. Isabella, shackled and silent, was led to a speculator named Vance, a thin man with flinty eyes and a predatory calm. He examined her as one inspects a rare artifact, noting her porcelain skin, her refined education, and her uncanny resemblance to her father. "You'll fetch a high price," Vance said, his voice low, almost intimate. "A jewel among the rest. But jewels break if handled poorly." Isabella's lips pressed together, a small imperceptible smile that no one could see but herself. She would play the role required of her, the sterling pearl or Montclair jewel, but inside, the storm had already begun. As she was lifted into the wagon, the rhythmic clink of chains accompanied the lurch of wooden wheels over mud. Across the aisle, huddled in shadow, sat Samuel, an older man whose eyes had known pain and endurance in equal measure. "You've got the look of the big house," Samuel whispered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her bones. "But the iron don't care, only the weight of the soul." Isabella's mind spiraled between memories of the library, the piano, her studies, and the reality of the journey ahead. The fear that had once been about lash marks or fieldwork transformed into the terror of erasure, the loss of her mind, her history, her very identity. By the time the wagon reached the fortified slave pen on the outskirts of Norfolk, Isabella had begun to weave her fury into something cold, precise, and lethal. She would wear the silk, the porcelain mask, the image of the perfect lady, but underneath she would remain a ghost, a shadow of fire, and a storm waiting to descend. The party. Virginia Star awaited at the harbor, its massive black hull belching smoke into the grey morning air. Isabella, led under the cover of a silk shawl, glimpsed the world beyond her own cage. The Atlantic stretched wide and indifferent, a mirror of the freedom she might one day reclaim. In her cabin aboard the ship, as the vessel groaned against the waves, Isabella allowed herself a single clandestine indulgence. She let her hands brush her own arms, feel the warmth of her skin, and imagine a world where touch was not a threat, where closeness was a whisper, a secret, a promise. The Montclair pearl had been sold, but the woman, the mind, the fire inside, her remained, and already her mind was plotting, scheming, ready to strike at the heart of those who had tried to cage her. The Atlantic stretched endlessly, a grey, restless expanse that seemed to swallow the sky and horizon alike. The Virginia Star creaked and groaned with every wave, as if the ship itself was reluctant to bear the weight of its human cargo. Below deck, Isabella Montclair's world was compressed into darkness, damp wood, and the metallic chill of iron shackles. Her companions were few but seasoned. Samuel, whose gaze had long ago learned the art of survival, and a handful of other enslaved. Men and women, each with eyes hollowed by fear yet burning with the quiet defiance of the oppressed. They whispered warnings, stories, and fragments of songs that reminded them of home. Isabella listened, absorbing every detail. Each word, each note, was a thread in the tapestry she was already weaving. A plan, a map, a mental ledger of every weakness she could exploit. Even in the cramped, suffocating hold, she allowed herself small acts of defiance, tracing patterns on the wooden planks with her fingertips, imagining the delicate arcs of letters she would one day write in freedom. Feeling her own pulse in the dark, night came, slow and suffocating. The sounds of the ocean were relentless, waves lashing against the hull, mingling with the groans and whispers of the imprisoned souls. Isabella closed her eyes and for a moment allowed herself a stolen fantasy, a quiet room, a fire glowing, a soft hand brushing against hers, a voice warm, intimate, whispering her name. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, a thrill of possibility and longing she had not dared to indulge in years. When she opened her eyes, she noticed a figure leaning against the bulkhead, someone she had not seen before. His presence was quiet, unassuming yet impossible to ignore. His skin was the deep brown of polished mahogany, his eyes dark and penetrating yet gentle. There was a strength in his posture, an unspoken promise of protection and understanding. "Name's Elias," he said softly, the words almost lost beneath the creak of the timbers. "I've seen the way you carry yourself. Don't know what's burning behind those eyes." Isabella studied him in the dim lantern light. He was no ordinary man. Every movement seemed measured, deliberate, yet effortless. His voice, low and smooth, stirred something she had thought buried, something dangerous, intoxicating, human. "I am Isabella," she replied, her tone calm, unbroken, though her heart beat faster than she would admit. "And if you think my thoughts are yours to know, you are mistaken." Elias smiled faintly, a curve of lips that suggested both amusement and understanding. "I don't need to know them all, only the ones that matter, the ones that will help us survive this voyage." Survival became a shared purpose. They moved together in whispers, mapping the guard rotations, the weak spots in the ship's chains, and the hidden nooks where small acts of rebellion could be staged. Every glance became a secret conversation, every brush of hands a spark of intimacy, tempered by the danger surrounding them. Days turned into nights, and the oppressive weight of the journey began to take its toll. The air below deck was thick with salt, sweat, and the sharp tang of fear. But Isabella learned to endure, drawing strength from the rhythm of the waves, the steady presence of Elias, and the unrelenting fire in her own chest. That night, when the other captives slept in fitful bundles, Isabella allowed herself a few moments of escape. Her hand brushing against Elias's, his voice close enough to make her pulse race, a shared warmth that reminded her she was not entirely alone. One evening, as the storm clouds gathered and the deck trembled under the first strikes of lightning, Isabella found herself on the upper deck, chains clinking softly as she stepped into the wind. The rain lashed her hair, plastering it to her face, and the chill bit into her skin. And yet she felt alive, utterly deliciously alive. The sensation of water and wind against her body, the threat of the storm, the closeness of Elias at her side, all igniting a fire she had long denied herself. "You shouldn't be up here," Elias said, his hand brushing hers in a gesture both protective and intimate. "It's dangerous." "I am already a prisoner," Isabella whispered, letting the wind carry her words. "A little danger will not hurt me." Their hands lingered together, fingers brushing, a promise of touch that was neither forbidden nor innocent, but something in between. A tether, a connection forged in fire and shadow. The storm broke fully as night fell, rain hammering the deck, wind tearing at sails, waves threatening to swallow the ship whole. Below, the captives cried out in terror. Above, Isabella stood resolute, feeling the exhilaration of risk, the intoxication of life in its rawest form. It was in that moment, amidst the chaos, that she understood a truth she had long resisted. Freedom was not a gift, it was a conquest. And conquest required courage, cunning, and sometimes unexpected alliances. Elias leaned closer, his lips near her ear, and she felt the warmth of him through the storm. "Together," he murmured, "we will see this through. You are not alone." Isabella's pulse surged, her breath caught between fear, desire, and determination. She allowed herself a brief surrender, a heartbeat of human need before pulling back, remembering who she was, what she had survived, and the fire that would guide her through every peril to come. The ship rocked violently, waves crashing over. The bow on the horizon was swallowed in darkness, but in that darkness, Isabella Montclair felt the stirrings of a plan, a rebellion that would begin in shadow and end in light. She would not be a pawn, she would be the storm. And in the quiet moments between thunder and lightning, she let her eyes find Elias again, a shared understanding passing between them, that in the midst of fear and confinement, desire and defiance could coexist, and perhaps in the end one might fuel the other. The Virginia Star cut through the Atlantic like a blade, leaving a trail of foam and despair in its wake. Below deck, the air was thick with fear, sweat, and the unrelenting weight of captivity. Yet amidst the darkness, Isabella Montclair's mind was alive, calculating, scheming. Every movement of the guards, every whisper of wind through the rigging, was a note in the symphony of her escape. Elias had become her shadow, a constant presence in the shadows of the hold. Together, they moved like predators, watching, waiting, understanding the fragile rhythm of the ship. "Tomorrow," Elias whispered one night, his lips brushing against her ear in a gesture both intimate and urgent. "We make our first move. A small one, but enough to test them, to see where the cracks lie." Isabella's pulse quickened. The closeness of him, the warmth of his body pressed against hers in the cramped, dim corridor, was a dangerous distraction, and yet a comfort. She tilted her head slightly, letting his breath ghost over her skin, a shiver running down her spine. "I'm ready," she murmured, her voice low, almost a promise. The next day, the ship was alive with the usual chaos, crewmen shouting orders, waves battering the hull, and the enslaved passengers pressed into their cramped spaces. Isabella and Elias moved with quiet precision, using the labor of the other captives as cover. Their first act was subtle, almost imperceptible. Chains were loosened, small tools secreted away, whispered instructions passed like secret prayers. Every glance, every touch was laden with tension, a friction that sent sparks dancing between them, igniting a dangerous but undeniable attraction. That evening the guards relaxed, lulled by routine and the false comfort of obedience. Isabella found herself leaning against a bulkhead, Elias beside her, both pretending to rest while their eyes roamed the deck above. In the dim light, their hands brushed, lingering just long enough to send a thrill of anticipation through her, a delicious, forbidden excitement. "You're reckless," Elias murmured, his voice low, but his fingers twined with hers anyway, acclaiming her warmth despite the risk. "And yet, I like it," she smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of her lips. "And you'll follow me, won't you? Even into danger." "I follow only those who lead well," he replied, his eyes dark and unwavering, "but I'll follow you anywhere." Night fell, cloaking the ship in shadow. Isabella and Elias slipped through narrow corridors, moving unseen, their plan unfolding with careful precision. The guards were predictable, their routines etched into habit. The crew was distracted by storms brewing on the horizon, leaving openings that the prisoners had never dared to exploit before. In one hidden nook beneath the captain's quarters, they paused. The space was small, intimate, almost suffocating, and yet the closeness was intoxicating. Their bodies pressed together, hearts racing, the risk of discovery making every touch electric. "Stay close," Isabella whispered, her lips almost brushing his neck, "and don't let them see you tremble." Elias's hand traced the line of her jaw, a gentle, daring caress that spoke of trust, desire, and unspoken promises. "I won't tremble," he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Not when I'm with you." The storm broke. Fully that night, a wall of rain and thunder that shook the ship to its core. Above, the deck was slick and dangerous, and yet it offered cover for their small acts of rebellion. Chains were shifted, locks tampered with, and a map of possibilities etched into their minds. Every move was deliberate, every whisper a heartbeat of courage. As dawn approached, exhaustion and exhilaration mingled. Isabella and Elias found themselves alone in the captain's hold for a moment, the storm raging outside like a symphony of chaos. In that fleeting privacy, they allowed themselves a stolen intimacy, fingers intertwined, foreheads pressed together, a quiet exchange of breath and warmth that lingered far longer than safety should allow. "You're fearless," Elias said, voice thick with admiration and something deeper, and maddeningly beautiful in it. Isabella chuckled softly, a sound that blended with the roar of the storm. "And you are dangerously charming. One day, you'll get me into more trouble than I can handle." But the moment was broken by the sound of footsteps above. The danger returned, sharp and immediate. They separated, hands lingering only in memory, and slipped back into the shadows. Every heartbeat now carried the dual thrill of fear and desire, each glance a silent promise of more to come. The storm began to subside, leaving the sea churning, restless, mirroring their own turbulent emotions. Isabella and Elias emerged from the hidden nook, renewed in purpose. Every risk they took, every intimate touch, every shared look forged a bond stronger than chains, a connection that could not be broken by iron or fear. They had made their first move. It was small, careful, almost imperceptible, but it had shifted the balance. And in the quiet moments before dawn, Isabella allowed herself a thought she had forbidden for so long, that freedom was no longer just a dream, and in the arms of Elias, it might be a dream worth fighting for. Together. The Atlantic had calmed, but the air aboard the Virginia Star was taut with anticipation. Every creak of the ship, every whisper of wind against the sails, felt like a heartbeat of the world, slow, deliberate, foreboding. Isabella and Elias had tested the waters with their first small act of defiance, and now the real game began. Beneath the deck, the prisoners moved with quiet determination. Chains had been subtly weakened, locks quietly observed and noted. Each step, each glance carried the weight of hope. Isabella's mind raced, a labyrinth of strategy and desire. Elias remained close, his presence a constant anchor. In the dim glow of the lanterns, their fingers brushed as they worked, and the spark between them was undeniable. Every touch was electric, every accidental graze a silent promise. "Tonight," Isabella whispered, voice low and trembling with adrenaline, "we take what we can. No hesitation." Elias nodded, his jaw set, eyes dark with intensity. "And if we're caught?" Her lips curved into a confident, almost wicked smile. "Then we burn the rules and make our own escape." The night was their ally. Shadows became allies, corners became refuges, and the sound of the waves masking their whispers. Isabella and Elias moved through the ship like dancers in a forbidden ballet, careful, precise, yet charged with a dangerous intimacy. They reached the cargo hold, a cavern of barrels, ropes, and hidden possibilities. Here they could move unnoticed, and here they could whisper without fear. Elias drew close, his chest pressing against hers as he crouched beside her, the warmth of his body a temptation she could barely resist. "Are you scared?" he asked, voice rough with desire and tension. Isabella's hand brushed his, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "Only of failing," she murmured, and her gaze met his, smouldering and daring. "Not of you." That brief, intimate exchange was enough to ignite a fire between them. He tilted his head, their foreheads touching in the dark, breaths mingling, hearts racing together. The danger outside made every stolen second feel infinite, every glance a thrill that could not be contained. They worked quickly, loosening chains, moving quietly among the crates. Every sound above deck, a shout, a footstep, a laugh, sent a jolt of fear through their bodies, heightening the intimacy of their closeness. Elias's hand brushed her waist as they passed, a fleeting touch that lingered in memory long after. Then came the first test of courage. A guard, lantern in hand, moved through the hold. Time slowed. Isabella and Elias froze, pressed against the barrels, hearts pounding. The guard's shadow fell across them. Elias's hand found hers, gripping tightly, their fingers entwined in silent solidarity. The brush of his palm against hers sent a shiver up her spine, the danger making their connection almost unbearable. The guard passed, oblivious, and they exhaled in unison, a mix of relief and exhilaration. Isabella's lips curved into a triumphant, daring smile. "See, nothing can stop us," she whispered, and Elias leaned in close, the warmth of his breath ghosting over her ear. "Nothing," he echoed, voice low and charged. As the night deepened, their plan took shape. They would not simply wait for opportunity, they would create it. Using the storm's memory as a guide, they mapped the guards' patrols, memorized the shadows, and rehearsed their moves in silence. Every step was dangerous, every glance a thrill. In a quiet corner of the hold, hidden from prying eyes, they paused. The closeness was intoxicating. Elias cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing against her cheeks, fingers threading into her hair. Their lips met in a slow, deliberate kiss, tasting fear, desire, and a hunger neither could deny. Isabella's hands roamed, exploring the contours of his back beneath the coarse fabric of his shirt. Their bodies pressed together in the shadows, heat and tension mingling with the scent of the sea and the metallic tang of freedom. Every heartbeat was a drum of defiance, every gasp a silent promise. They broke apart only when necessity demanded, returning to their work with renewed determination. The connection between them had become a weapon, fueling their courage as much as their desire. Hours passed like this, a blend of stealth, strategy, and stolen intimacy. Chains were loosened, a secret cache of tools discovered, and the captives slowly became aware of the shift in power. Isabella and Elias had sparked a quiet rebellion, a ripple of hope in a sea of despair. As dawn approached, the first real challenge loomed, the captain's personal quarters. The guards were heavier here, the risk palpable. Isabella glanced at Elias, their fingers brushing in a silent promise of support and shared courage. "Are you ready?" she whispered, voice trembling with excitement and fear. Elias smiled, dark and intense. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," he said, leaning close to press a fleeting kiss to her temple. "And neither have you." Together, they crept toward the heart of the ship's power, their bodies moving in tandem, minds aligned, hearts beating in synchrony. Every shadow was an ally, every sound a potential threat, and every brush of skin against skin a reminder of what they were fighting for, not just freedom but each other. The storm of desire, danger, and determination had only just begun. The dawn cast a muted light across the deck of the Virginia Star, turning the sea into a glimmering expanse of silver. But the calm was deceptive. Below decks, Isabella and Elias moved like shadows among shadows, every step deliberate, every heartbeat a drum of impending action. The crew above was still waking, unaware that the seeds of rebellion had already taken root. The captives, emboldened by Isabella and Elias's courage, whispered in corners, chains subtly loosened, nerves steeling themselves for the first strike. Elias's hand found hers in the dim light of the cargo hold, their fingers intertwined, warmth passing between them like a secret current. The proximity of danger only amplified the electricity between them. "Tonight," he whispered, voice rough with desire and urgency, "we ignite more than just the flames of escape." Isabella's lips curved into a smile, a sultry, daring smile that made his pulse spike. She leaned close, letting her breath brush his ear. "We light the fire in every heart down here," she murmured, "and in each other." The plan was risky. The captain's quarters were heavily guarded, but the map of the ship they had memorized offered a narrow path. Stealth was their ally, speed their weapon. Every shadow, every barrel, every narrow passage became a stage for their daring ballet. They reached the staircase leading to the upper deck. Elias paused, hand on the railing, eyes scanning the approaching guards. Isabella's hand slid up his arm, her touch lingering at his shoulder, a subtle, intimate encouragement. "Stay close," she breathed, voice barely above the whisper of the waves. Her lips brushed his jaw in a fleeting, tantalizing kiss that sent shivers through them both. Step by step they ascended, hearts pounding in tandem. The first guard loomed ahead. Elias moved like a shadow, pulling Isabella behind a barrel. The guard's boots scraped the wooden floor, oblivious to the danger inches away. They exhaled quietly, relief mingling with desire. Elias pressed a hand to Isabella's back, pulling her close, and she leaned into him, their bodies a forbidden warmth in the cold, early morning air. Above deck, the first act of rebellion began. A sharp whistle, barely audible, signaled the captives below to act. Chains fell silently, locks loosened, and the prisoners stirred with a newfound ferocity. Isabella and Elias moved like dancers, in a deadly waltz, their closeness making each step charged with longing and power. Elias's hand brushed against her hip, a touch that lingered far too long to be accidental. "Hold nothing back," Isabella whispered, her lips close to his, every word a promise of fire and passion. They descended into the hold again, where the freed captives were rallying, a surge of determination in their eyes. The scent of salt and sweat mixed with the undeniable attraction between the two leaders, creating a heady, intoxicating tension. "Elias," Isabella said, voice husky, filled with the thrill of danger and desire, "we can't stop now, not for them, and not for us." He captured her gaze, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling. "Then we don't," he murmured, "not for anything." The rebellion ignited with precision. Guards were subdued quietly, captives moved to strategic positions, and the Virginia Star became a storm of chaos below its serene surface. Every move Isabella and Elias made was calculated, yet the proximity of each other made every glance, every touch, a silent, intimate rebellion of its own. At one point, Elias pulled Isabella into a narrow corridor, pressing her against the wall. Their lips met in a fierce, hungry kiss, a collision of desire and adrenaline. Her hands threaded through his hair, his fingers tracing the curve of her waist, grounding her even as chaos erupted around them, breaking apart only when necessary. They resumed their roles, coordinating, inspiring, leading. Every command was infused with subtle seduction, every glance a spark in the tinder of their growing connection. By nightfall, the Virginia Star was no longer the same ship. The captives moved with purpose, the guards were confused and scattered, and the crew whispered rumors of a power rising from below. Isabella and Elias, blood pounding, hearts racing, stole moments of heat and intimacy in the shadows, a dangerous thrill that neither could resist. In the captain's quarters, the final confrontation loomed. The room was heavily guarded, but they had the element of surprise, and the unspoken bond that had become their greatest weapon. Elias pressed Isabella against the doorframe, his lips brushing her neck, a tantalizing promise of what awaited after victory. She gasped softly, desire and tension intertwining in a heady rush. "After this," he murmured, voice low and magnetic, "it's just us." She smiled, a bold, seductive curve of lips that made the dangerous world around them fade. "Then let's make it ours," she whispered. The door swung open. Freedom, fire, and desire collided. The captain's quarters loomed ahead, a bastion of control and power that had kept the Virginia Star's horrors in place for far too long. Isabella and Elias exchanged a look, part determination, part unspoken longing. Every nerve in their bodies thrummed with anticipation, not just for the battle, but for each other. Elias's hand found Isabella's, squeezing it with quiet reassurance, and she leaned into him, her lips brushing the back of his hand in a fleeting, intimate gesture. "After this," Elias whispered, voice rough and magnetic, "we claim more than freedom." She smiled, her lips almost grazing his ear, a soft, seductive promise that made his heart race. "We claim everything," she breathed. "Each other, every stolen moment." The door was the only obstacle now, but it was heavily guarded. Elias signaled, and the freed captives moved like shadows, striking silently. Blades clashed softly in the dim light. The room became a dance of precision and stealth. Inside, the captain's eyes widened as he saw Isabella and Elias storm the room. His shock was their advantage. Yet in the chaos, Elias pulled Isabella close, her body pressed against his in a spine-tingling embrace that was as much desire as it was strategy. Her lips found his briefly, a spark that ignited amidst the violence around them. The fight was brutal but swift. Each move of Isabella and Elias was calculated, yet every touch carried an electric charge. When Elias's hand grazed her side, she shivered, a tremor of desire passing through them, even as they dodged a swinging blade. The captain lunged, but Elias was faster, disarming him in a heartbeat. Isabella's eyes burned with triumph, her hands steady even in the storm of adrenaline. She pressed a hand to Elias's chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart, her lips close to his, whispering, "We're unstoppable. Together." The crew, witnessing the shift in power, faltered. Fear and awe spread among them. The Virginia Star's hold over them had crumbled, replaced by a new force, one led by courage, love, and the unbreakable bond of two hearts intertwined. With the captain subdued, Isabella and Elias stood in the center of the room. The air was thick with sweat, salt, and the lingering charge of passion. Elias leaned down, capturing her lips in a deep, intoxicating kiss, their bodies pressing together in a long, overdue union of desire and triumph. She wrapped her arms around his neck, every inch of tension melting into fire. The crew watched silently, the gravity of the moment leaving them powerless. Isabella pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against his, breathing mingling in the most intimate of dances. "We did it," she whispered. "All of it. Together." Elias's hands cradled her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "And this," he murmured, voice low and throaty, "is just the beginning." They moved through the ship, taking command with a quiet authority that was both fearless and magnetic. The freed captives rallied behind them, inspired by the courage and passion of their leaders. Every order, every glance carried the weight of newfound freedom and a subtle, undeniable intimacy. By nightfall, the Virginia Star sailed as a new ship, its darkness replaced by light, not just from lanterns but from the fire of love and rebellion. Isabella and Elias stole moments in the shadows, touches and kisses that were as much celebration as they were temptation, each one a promise that danger and desire could coexist. On the deck, beneath a sky painted with stars, Elias took Isabella's hand. "We've conquered the storm," he said, voice husky, eyes dark with need. "Now we sail into something even wilder, each other." She pressed close, her lips brushing his in a slow, deliberate kiss, full of longing and victory. Then, "Let's never let go," she whispered, their bodies swaying slightly with the rhythm of the calm sea, their hearts beating in perfect synchrony. The wind carried away the last echoes of tyranny, leaving only the promise of freedom, passion, and an unbreakable bond. Together, Isabella and Elias were unstoppable, their love and courage lighting the way across the endless horizon. The dawn rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in molten gold and crimson. The Virginia Star, once a vessel of terror, now glided gracefully over the waves, a symbol of freedom and new beginnings. Isabella stood at the bow, her hair catching the sunlight, eyes scanning the endless expanse of the sea. Elias approached silently, his presence a comforting warmth behind her. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. Her body fit perfectly against his, every curve and contour igniting a fire that neither danger nor victory could diminish. She leaned back into him, her lips brushing the shell of his ear in a whisper of longing. "It feels endless," she murmured. Elias tilted his head, kissing her neck softly, lingering in that tender electric moment. "Not endless," he said, voice low and husky, "but ours. Every horizon, every storm, every quiet night." The crew moved about the deck, laughter and chatter filling the air. Freed from tyranny, they looked at Isabella and Elias with a mixture of respect and awe. They had not only survived, they had conquered. Yet for Isabella and Elias, survival had become something more, a promise of love, of passion, and of a future they would craft together. In the captain's cabin they found the maps, charts, and remnants of the old regime. Isabella's hand brushed against Elias's as they examined them, fingers intertwining in a slow, deliberate caress that spoke louder than words. "This is our world now," Elias said, tracing a line across the map with her finger, their hands pressing together as if sealing a pact of heart and desire. "Every journey, every adventure we take together." Isabella turned to him, eyes dark with need, lips barely an inch from his. "Then let's begin with this one," she whispered, pulling him into a kiss that was at once tender and consuming, a merging of relief, triumph, and unrestrained passion. Their bodies pressed together in the cabin, the outside world fading to nothing. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a declaration, an intoxicating dance of love and desire. Elias's hands traced the curves of her body with reverent heat, while Isabella responded in kind, their connection both sensual and profoundly intimate. Hours passed unnoticed, marked only by the changing light of the sky. When they finally emerged, they were wrapped in each other's arms, hearts beating in perfect synchrony. The sea, the wind, and the sun had become witnesses to their union, as if the world itself celebrated the love they had fought to claim. Beyond the deck, the crew prepared for the first voyage under new leadership. Isabella addressed them, her voice carrying authority and warmth. "We are free," she said, "and freedom is not just survival, it is living fully, boldly, and together." Elias stood beside her, his hand brushing hers in a subtle, intimate caress, a silent promise that whatever horizons they faced, they would face them together. As the Virginia Star sailed into the open sea, Isabella and Elias stood at the bow, the wind in their hair, the sun on their faces. He pulled her close, lips finding hers in a kiss that was both gentle and fevered, a perfect balance of romance and desire. She whispered against his mouth, "No storm can touch us now. Only us." The waves sparkled like liquid fire under the rising sun. The Virginia Star, no longer a symbol of fear, became a beacon of love, courage, and unbreakable passion. Isabella and Elias clung to each other, bodies pressed together, hearts entwined, ready to face every horizon, every tempest, with desire and devotion as their guide. As night fell, stars blanketed the sky. They lay on the deck, wrapped in blankets, bodies still intertwined, whispering soft words, kisses tracing the curve of each other's skin, the rhythm of their breathing a tender lullaby. Every touch was a promise, every sigh a confession. In the distance, the moon rose, casting a silver glow over the waves. The Virginia Star sailed on, carrying its passengers not just across the sea, but into a future forged from courage, love, and the intoxicating thrill of being truly, deeply alive. Isabella pressed her forehead to Elias's, murmuring softly, "With you, every horizon is ours." Elias held her tighter, voice low and fervent, "Forever ours, and beyond." The sea stretched endlessly before them, but with each other, every horizon was no longer just a destination. It was a promise, a story of passion, adventure, and unyielding love.
This is not only a story. This is the act of love, defiance, and freedom. Subscribe for what comes after.